All right, everyone, welcome to the April Arcadia Book Club discussion of The Half-Known Life in Search of Paradise by Pico Iyer. So this was a lovely way to travel the world. Some places I was happy to travel through a book. Some places I would like to go in person. So I believe this is the first time we've done a travel type book in the virtual book club. I know we did a Bill Bryson in our earlier iteration of book club in person, which those are always fabulous too, Bill Bryson. So Pico Iyer, very famous travel writer. This one is more of a, traveling inward as well, and putting all of his travel writings, or some of his travel writings, into one compilation. So let's talk about the search for paradise.
Thoughts?
Mary Pat's not here.
Yeah.
Mary Pat always goes first, and she's not here tonight. So.
Oh, that's right. Somebody has to fill in for Mary Pat.
Well, I'll say on the weekend, I had my feet in the Atlantic Ocean. That felt like paradise. So thinking about that and this book, to me, it seems almost like, for me, to be paradise, it has to be a place where you can be quiet and just feel the vastness of the world, like looking out at the ocean, looking at the Rocky Mountains, something like that. So for me personally, it has to be a place where I can just be quiet and sit and think. And I don't know that I ever actually get to a point of meditation, but maybe more of a point of appreciation. I think it's good to feel small. I think it's good to feel your place in the world, your place in the universe, and that problems are very minuscule when you think about the vastness of this world.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Keeping things in perspective is pretty important, I think. He's really good at that, I think, providing sort of context and perspective. Because I've read him on and off for years, but yeah, this book just really captured me. There's a lot of places in it that I loved how personal it was, while it was very much a book about sort of important, crucial places in the world. But what about, Nancy just talked about what her vision of paradise, and when I wrote the newsletter, I sort of made a jokey thing about paradise, but can you divorce paradise from religion? Or are there certain places that just kind of demand a response that's larger than individual human response? I'll give you one brief example. I went to, some friends and I had entered the lottery to do a private trip down the Grand Canyon. We entered the lottery in 1978, and we made a pact. There were four of us. We made a pact that if we ever won the lottery, we would all go, no matter where we were, no matter what time it was. And we won the lottery in 1985, and we put together a group of 16 people. 14 people. 4 rafts, 2 kayaks, and a 16-day trip through the canyon. But one of the days, so we had a huge amount of time to do this, to do side canyon hiking. And one of the days, a couple of guys who'd been on the canyon before said, "You've got to do this long hike to this Havasu sacred place." And we all went, oh, okay, you know, and about 5 of us went. And we were talking and, you know, joking around. And we got, you know, close to this place. And the guy stopped us and he said, okay, we're going to come through this little path through the rocks, and then something's going to happen. So maybe don't talk for a few minutes. And we did this thing, and we walked into this space that I mean, there was just no other way to describe it than as a kind of natural cathedral without a ceiling. I mean, it was the most extraordinary feeling. I mean, you instantly, when you walked into this space, you just thought, oh my God, or oh my whoever, because it just demanded that. And it's the only time in my life, I think, I've really ever felt that. Other than maybe at Notre Dame when I lit a candle for my mother just in case she was watching. But I mean, it was really unreal. I mean, just indescribable. And so, you know, when I was reading some of these things, maybe the Japan situation kind of made me think of it the most, but geez, it's really something. So, all right, I'm shutting up. Otherwise, Maggie will think, oh, this is one of those book clubs where that guy just talks all the time. So, okay. Or the dog barks all the time. Okay, excuse me, somebody else talk. What are you doing? Come here.
Oh, actually, I wanted to go back because when I was looking at on page, if I can read the numbers, 128, it's really talking about the fact that, you know, to be in paradise is boring. And the fact that once some people discover it, then it isn't boring and it isn't paradise anymore. And so that you have to get used to the fact that for most people, the definition of paradise is someplace boring. But I kind of struggle with that a little bit, especially the way the book goes, because what it is to be connected. So you need to be connected with people in paradise, but not being so busy that, you know, I go back to my favorite philosopher was Yogi Berra. And he said, you know, this place was too busy. No one goes there anymore. It's too busy. So it's just the same thing. You have to keep paradise from being too busy in order for it to be paradise. Once it's too busy, then you're dealing with everything else that's going around. And I thought, so for so many of the cities, you know, you got into a little bit of why it's important, and then all the problems that were there. And so we kept seeing, okay, this is nice, but and so people get in the way of paradise is what I took away from this.
Well, and I mean, it brought up the question for me of what is paradise? How do we define paradise? And we, you know, many of us have that, you know, traditional image of paradise, but I don't know. I think paradise is something different, really. I think paradise isn't, I mean, James, I could certainly resonate with what you were saying about having that kind of like an experience of awe, I guess, you know, when you were in the Grand Canyon. I mean, I've certainly had moments like that, you know. I mean, the one that came to mind was body surfing off the California coast. And I mean, everything was perfect. It's like my body was totally in sync. I mean, I was, you know, in my 20s, so it made it a lot easier, but, you know, but it was like I was in rhythm with the earth, you know. And I mean, I was so ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, you know, like ripped off my bikini top. It was late in the day. Nobody was at the beach. I'm like, look, you know, this is paradise. But I mean, but it was like a moment, you know. But I mean, so much of paradise, I think, is, you know, when you're weeding your garden or something. That's when I think paradise really happens, you know. And so many of the paradises that he was investigating were in really war-torn, conflicted parts of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, just these two things rammed up against one another, you know, over and over again. So I don't, know if that makes any sense, but I mean, like if we each thought, if we each asked ourselves, what's my personal paradise? You know, what would that be? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh-oh,
Well-
Larry's gonna say something. I see him moving his hand to his mouse.
No, come on. I didn't even say anything yet.
I saw your hand move. I'm sorry, I'm teasing you. I'll mute
I know,
myself.
that's fine. Well, I was going to start by saying I thought Paradise was Arcadia Books and APT because I've been going to Arcadia since they opened, and I've been going to APT for 40 years. And I took my wife there on our first date 20 years ago. And so that's my glib answer. But I just wanted to start by saying, since I was not a fan of The School for Good Mothers, this book was incredibly wonderful. And I've read articles by the author before, but never in a book like this. And I can't remember a book that talked about all the major world religions in such an entertaining way. And I can't really pick out one favorite part, but I really liked in Jerusalem on page 110, where he said the single most moving sentence he encountered said, "Please," in all capital letters, no explanations inside the church. And that kind of irreverent tone, I thought, carried out through the book. I heard the Dalai Lama speak in Madison one time, and I thought he did a great job of capturing him. And I thought his time in Israel was interesting. I happen to be Jewish. My wife is Catholic, so we have interesting discussions. But I love the line where I think this might have been one of his guides on 112 said, "If I've left you feeling frustrated and confused, I've succeeded. Now you know what it's like to be an Israeli." And just the way he wrote and going to all the places, it really was an enjoyable and thought-provoking read. So sorry, I totally liked it.
Very disappointing, Larry. Oh, well. We'll deal with your enthusiasm, but we don't like it.
Well, I thought the really interesting thing that came across to me, and I agree, I think, with the earlier comment that it begs the question about, it makes us ask the question about what is paradise for us? And of all the places he describes, is there one that seems to maybe ring truer than others? But I found it interesting that the focus on paradise is on places a lot, and that it seems, and that they all seem to involve some kind of a conflict that the person has to wrestle with in order to find the paradise. Some of the conflict is very violent, very physical, others not so much, but that seemed to be one of his primary themes, was that you had to, for paradise to be meaningful, there had to be something where things were different theories and people were rubbing up against each other. And out of that came more of a paradise. Otherwise it would be too static, I think, in his view. And he seemed to really focus on the need for you to be focused in reality, not an ethereal place. It seemed to me that his view of paradise was finding it in the real world and finding it in the real world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that despite Catholic grade school and high school, I'm not a particularly religious person. And part of it for me is that it seems like so many religions make their paradise so small. You know, it's like we're going to go to paradise, but the rest of you people that we haven't converted yet don't get to go, you know. And so to me, it's always been kind of a negative thing that, you know, what different religions preach about paradise. But I think that paradise is different to every individual at different times in their life. You know, I saw somebody posted a cute little meme on Facebook a while back that said something to the effect of, you know, paradise is where the dogs are, you know, and it was just this picture with, you know, the entrance to heaven and there's all these dogs. And, you know, for me, maybe that's what paradise is. But I did also find the book, on another note, I found the book really interesting because I've been to a couple of the places that he wrote about. I've been to the Buddhist temple in Dharamsala, and I've been to Delhi. And so it was really interesting just reading, you know, his descriptions of how kind of wild those places are, and the traffic and the drivers and stuff. But so it, you know, I really enjoyed the book and it makes me want to read some more things, but at the same time, it also made me think about how kind of futile it is in some ways to define what paradise is, and
I'm sorry, what was the word you used?
how futile
Well, futile.
it is to define what paradise is for anybody other than yourself. And maybe you need to find it just whatever's right for you within yourself and in reality.
Yeah, I mean, before I forget, Allison, when you were talking about the body surfing, it made me think of Spalding Gray, who was always looking for his perfect moments, you know, and that was sort of that's how he defined, you know, the things to aspire to, or the kind of these little moments in life that he could describe as a perfect moment. Didn't work out so well for him, alas. But I feel like he went to all these places as a way to kind of recheck in with them. But his real journey was about finding the fact that paradise really is inside you, and it isn't a place, and it needn't be a place. And that in fact, when you, as exactly, you know, as was said before, or as the Eagles said it, you know, when you start defining something as that, then everybody wants it. And everybody who, you know, usually those are people who want it, as in Jerusalem, who are on opposite sides of a religious situation. And so you end up with that, you know, that crazy, what was it? I think I can find it quickly. Oh yeah. Let's see. If the cha-cha comes out, it is the enemy. The devil is waiting to make use of us. The local guide, meanwhile, was pointing out two burly mustachioed men seated on the steps next to the church's entrance and explaining how, by Saladin's decrees, it was two Muslim families who had controlled the keys of the Christian church for more than 800 years and locked the squabbling monks inside the space every evening. You know, for 800 years. And I mean, it's just, that's what happens to paradise when too many people think it's paradise, or what it represents, or a document, or a car, you know, whatever it is that people place some kind of value on that seems incalculable. Yeah, but I think that was the thing that moved me so much about the book, was that he basically said, I've been to these places, and in some cases he'd spent a lot of time in those places, and somehow what he was learning was the places are not it. And that was very moving to me.
All the places have heights and snakes and angry monks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mostly confine myself to reading about Sri Lanka, and I found it very sort of disturbing hearing about all of this religious contention between various factions, which I suppose happens everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did want to ask Larry, which play did you see for your first date with your wife? I love APT too. So what did you see?
It was Taming of the Shrew, which was a great first date to see, and it was Jim DeVita and Colleen Madden, and every other version of Taming of the Shrew that we've seen over the years have not measured up to that.
No.
But I want to agree with, I'm sorry to agree with James, but on page 195, I agree with the conclusion. The author says, paradise, in short, is regained by finding the wonder within the moment. I do think that was his conclusion, and his quotes of the Dalai Lama were very similar to that, despite he went to all these beautiful places, it was more, paradise was found more within than without. But that was one of the things that I liked about the book. I also liked, I never heard this belief that if somebody died who was a book lover, you then needed to read more books for them, since they weren't around to, this is on 183. Now that her book-loving mother was gone, she was obliged to devour books on behalf of her parent in the afterworld, because the daughter was not a reader until her reader mother died. So I never heard that before. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
And I assume bookstores would endorse that also.
Maybe we'll put up a
Read a book for your dead friend or parent.
Oh.
You do. I mean, okay, I'll tell you a really funny, this has nothing to do with this book. I had a very dear friend, and a lot of you know that he died about 1.5 years ago. We were very, very close. I would sometimes send him a box of books. 6 weeks before he died, I sent him a box of books. 5 days before he died, he called me and he said, I got to tell you something. Sue thought the box was for her and for me, and I thought it was for Sue. So for 4.5 weeks, we stepped over the box and neither of us ever opened it. And I said, that is so typical of you. I mean, it's just insane. And I said, I sent you Hamnet because I wanted you to read Hamnet because I knew you would love it. And he said, I just started it tonight and it's fabulous. And then he died before he finished it. But I mean, the point is, it's, books and books with friends, and, you read something and you think, oh gosh, I still, my mother's been dead 25 years or 28 years. And I think, oh, my mom would love this book, so maybe that's why I read so much. I don't know. What other comment? Yeah, but I do think, I mean, all right, so let's do a little exercise. What is your idea of paradise?
I guess this notion came to me after reading the book, but I think it's reflects on a long held kind of series of thoughts. Towards the end of the book, I was recalling the passage from Corinthians about sometimes seeing in the glass darkly, now we see face to face. And it seemed to me that phrase was very much what he talked about a lot, that it was often very murky, especially with the conflict, but then there would be the glimpses of clarity. And that sort of fit, I think, with this notion of the Dalai Lama, that you have to keep working at it and you have to keep seeing it in the real moment. And I think back to the earlier question about how this all relates to religion, it can or it can't. the other part of that verse for a Christian is that there's the promise that there is a God that knows you and knows you personally, and that you just keep working at trying to see through the glass darkly. But and sometimes you'll have clarity, but you have the assurance that there is a God that knows you personally. And so that to me meant that if you are a believing Christian, you can then think of paradise as something in the future. Well, you still have to do what they're saying is work in the present. You just have to keep after it, trying to see clearly. But there is that promise of something in the future. So that in the promise in the future is the reconciliation with the God that knows you unconditionally. At least that would be. And that part of it, of course, is not something that would have been reflected in his book because he didn't have that that kind of a viewpoint. But it seemed to me that it tied, that some of these pieces from that verse to tie into some of his thinking as well.
That's good. Other people with a thought about what your paradise is or your perfect moment?
Well, I've been reading Ross Gay lately, so I seem to be leaning towards those little tiny moments of delight in life and writing something each day myself. And paradise seems too overwhelmingly huge, whereas my little taste of a delight for the day is very lovely to me, very comforting to think of one tiny little aspect that I cherish.
Yeah, that's nice. That's accomplishable.
Mm.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's how it has to be, to come to you in little snippets so you appreciate it in comparison to the other moments of life that aren't such paradise. Larry, I picked that same line was what I had marked too. I thought that was wonderful. And kind of the same idea. Paradise, in short, is regained by finding the wonder within the moment. So finding those moments and appreciating them. Does anybody have any thoughts of, did this make you want to travel anywhere? It made me want to travel to Japan. I was kind of hoping Kate would be on with us because I don't believe Kate went there. She went to see the tree with the monkeys though.
Oh, she did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Do you
wow.
remember that story where she was up in the tree hiding from the
Oh,
monkeys?
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, well, I always want to travel more, but one of the things that did kind of strike me about it was that, and I don't know whether people will agree with this or not, but to me, it felt like he had a certain advantage in being able to travel to a lot of those places, being a man and traveling alone or with just a guide. And for a good number of those places, I know that I would never be able to go. You know, I would not be allowed to walk into a mosque. I would not be safe to go to some of those places. I would, you know, and I found that really sad. I found it sad that he had that that freedom and that ability to do things that I don't think even as a younger person I would have been able to do as a woman.
Right, I agree.
I don't know. Is that me being paranoid, or is that, or do you?
No,
No,
I agree too. I'm glad you brought that up because I was really struck by the gendered element of it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a gorgeous book. He's a fabulous writer. I mean, his writing is beautiful, but I had the same reaction, Diane, that these are not places I would feel safe. He was also being sent by magazines. No, nobody's.
I mean, to me, it was a very male book, that
Yes,
the
I'm so
all
glad you
male,
said that
it's
because I
male.
thought that too. I kept thinking,
Um,
I like this guy. I used to teach him, but this is a guy's journey, a guy's investigation of paradise.
Yeah. I mean,
And
not that I didn't enjoy it,
yeah.
I still certainly enjoyed it, but it made also at the same time, like I said, made me a little bit sad that
Yeah.
this is not
Yeah.
something I could ever hope to do.
yeah.
So what kind of paradises would we investigate, Diane?
Well, I like Larry's idea of a bookstore and a theater.
Yes, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Larry, I have to tell you, this has nothing to do with the book, but my husband and I courted at APT.
You did?
And what
All our
was the
first-
first play that you guys saw together?
I don't remember. Isn't that embarrassing? I don't remember. I'll have to ask him. He probably remembers better than I do.
How
I
long
was
ago?
too stricken. Oh man. What are you gonna do? Look it up?
No, I'm just curious because my wife and I did a story corps for our library because our first date took 16 hours because I lived in Waukesha and my wife lived in Mequon. So I had to drive to Mequon to pick her up, take her out to brunch at the French restaurant on the east side of Milwaukee, drive all the way to Mazamani for dinner at the old feed mill, go to the play, and then drive all the way back to Mequon because it was our first date. I mean, I wasn't going to let her. So it was like a 16-hour. I mean, it was like 3 months of dating in one evening and morning. So I recommend it. When I was
An
young,
immersion date.
when I was young and single, which I was for quite a long time in my life, my ideal date was we would go to a movie at the Downer Theater because they had all the good foreign independent films. And then Harry Schwartz bookstore was down the street. And I'd take my date to the bookstore and I'd say, do I want to spend more time with my date or would I rather be home reading a book? And the books won out more often than not, but at least I saw a good movie and I bought a book to take home with me after the disappointing date was over.
You were searching for paradise.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was.
Well, I think it's pretty dangerous to do Taming of the Shrew at your first date. It's a fairly controversial play to.
I was struck by the comment that was made about this being very much a male book. And I wonder how much that related to one of the feelings I had, that it was so solo and not a lot of personal interaction. He talked to guides and he did things with guides, but there really wasn't much discussion with people about the meaning of the place for them. There was some in the cemetery in Sri Lanka and with the monk in Japan, but prior to that, I don't seem to recall that much. And I wonder if that is adds to the feeling of it being a guidebook. We don't talk about stuff type.
I felt that way too, and I think for me it's exactly, I think it was Diane who said I think right off the bat, I was sort of off put because he can go to all these places and he can do all these things just because he's a man. And, you know, it opens with him going to the mosque. And I was just thinking like, okay, but you're already like, you're chopping in half the people who can experience this. And yeah, it was kind of, made me angry and it made me a little depressed. And I think it just sort of wasn't invoking paradise for me. So I think that's what it was for me anyway.
Wow. That's really, yeah, I love that's really great. I mean, because I had, you know, being a guy, you know, I mean, I just felt like, I mean, I wouldn't want to go to those places either, but it's really, that's a very powerful thing. If you could go, which of the places did you want to go? Or does paradise not connect to place for you?
I think for me personally, paradise is probably more of a feeling. And I think it's in the everyday for me. Like it's, you know, taking the dogs for a walk or getting to chat with my wife, getting to read, the first cup of tea, you know, that kind of thing for me. But at the same time, I do really like to travel. And I think, you know, those experiences are so important, getting to meet different people and see different things. And I would love to go into a mosque. Like I would love to see that and, you know, see what a huge chunk of the world sees as beautiful. And, you know, the places of worship are so fundamental in how we express that sometimes, especially, you know, for a period of history there, right? And yeah, I would love to get to do that.
Yeah, I think the way, you know, when Allison described earlier that perfect moment, you know, body surfing, I think for me, it's those moments like that. And I can think back on certain moments, you know, when I've been out sailing, you know, when you're out on the water and it's the water and the wind and the sun and, you know, where you're in that kind of sense of bliss. But you know, like I said, I've been to some of those places and it's fascinating, but I don't know that I felt like it was paradise, if that makes sense.
And of course, they didn't lead, they don't live up to the original definition of paradise. I mean, he starts out in Iran because the word paradise comes from the notion of garden, quiet, soothing, less stress. And so most of the places that he went to, maybe the exception of the cemetery in Japan, none of the places really seem to match up to that word definition of paradise.
They were crowded and noisy and people were fighting and squabbling and killing each other over religious beliefs. Especially, you know, like Janet, like you mentioned, the Sri Lanka was so sad reading that section, with the tragic situation between the people there.
Do you think so? I think it's so interesting that you brought up the male perspective on it, because I was thinking before you did that, when I was trying to think over the question of what do I think of as paradise, and when Allison was talking, I was thinking about this similar moment that I had a long time ago. What I was really thinking was my gut response was paradise is freedom from myself, like getting out of my own way and being released, from the ways that I just make everything harder for myself. And how does that happen? How do I get there, wherever that is? Because I was thinking wherever you go, there you are, with what you were talking about in the beginning of the discussion. And then the moment I was remembering when Allison was talking was a moment that I also I was in Costa Rica, and it was the moon, it was a full moon, and I was on the beach and there was no one around, and I just went in the water, like in my clothes, and I can't even tell you what a big deal this is. Like it was the absence of fear, but it was more like the release of fear. Like in this one moment, I was going to be like, you know what, whatever, I'm not going to think about my clothes or the shark that's about to eat me or all of the other things they're going to like brush up on, and that I haven't told anyone that I'm going out and a riptide and any of it, like all of it. For some reason in that moment, I just decided not to feel those things. And it was so freeing. And I don't think it lasted very long, probably like 3 minutes or something. And then I was out of there. But I was thinking about that. And then, so when you turned it to this idea of why we can't have that same experience as a man, I think it is that for me. I think that it is that sense, that freedom from fear at any level, even just subtle ways you don't even realize the ways that you're affected by fear or by your just own insecurities or anxieties. I think that could be paradise just about anywhere. And it makes me think about too a car accident I was in once, and the how not scared I was at the sort of peak of this moment that I was like being thrown from a car, how everything slowed down and it was just calm and peaceful. And I say all those things as someone who is just rarely ever not scared of things. So I think that there's something in all of that for me of what you're getting at here with what paradise is. So that's what I didn't read the book. So take that all with a grain of salt.
No, that's good though. That's great. It's because I think, fear stops us all the time. And I'm sure that in certain religious lives, fear is a huge factor, in the way people choose to behave or not behave. Fear of losing your chance at a paradise beyond the present life, or
So one of the things that kept occurring to me was almost every place he went, and maybe this is just me, but I was thinking, that would be another great place to be killed because of what's going on there. The one cruise I went on in my life, we went to Greece and Turkey, and I was sitting in the square amidst all these famous mosques, and my wife wasn't tired, so she was touring them, and we got back, and a week later, that's where there was a picture of that exact place where I was sitting, where there was a terrorist bombing. And I don't know, I kept thinking about, I wouldn't want to be in Israel right now with what's going on. Wouldn't want to be in Sri Lanka, wouldn't want to be here or there. So I just, maybe that was my narrative. But getting back to the philosophical question, I really like this part on 122 where he said, the Dalai Lama keeps reminding fellow Buddhists, paradise can be found only in the middle of what's around us. Shangri-La exists exclusively in the imagination. Real life can offer us pleasures that fantasy leaves out. And I thought that was one of the other themes in the book, that it's wonderful to travel all over the world and have these insights, but in some ways, if you're not exploring things in your mind and trying to figure out what's important in life, you're not going to find it externally. And so I thought that was an interesting contrast, that on the surface, the book was, here I go looking for paradise here, and there. But in the end, it's like he could have just sat home and discussed his thoughts and would have come to the same conclusion. I guess the other thing I was going to say about death, it seems like most major religions overemphasize the next life. And, it's okay to be a suicide bomber because that's what I'm going to see the 87 virgins that I couldn't have here. Or, that's, if you talk to 10 Jews, you'll get 10 different definitions of Judaism. But the Judaism I believe in is, hey, we don't know if there's an afterlife or not. But you know what? What really matters is how we live our life here. And I like to joke with some of my Christian friends that, Jesus was trying to reform Judaism. He wasn't trying to start a new religion. Really, Christianity is just one big misunderstanding. And part of the problem is the whole emphasis is on the next life. And so that allows people to kill in God's name, do wars, and be terrible people because it's all going to work out in the next life. So I don't know. The other thing I want to mention was I loved he woke up one day thinking about Thoreau, because when I first read Henry David Thoreau in 11th grade, I hated him. And then we were having a test or having to write something, and I said, okay, I'm going to give him another chance. I sat in a different chair, and somehow I read, I think it was the conclusion, and that's probably the book I've reread the most throughout my life, because I like to quote, if one advances confidently in the direction of your dreams and live the life you've imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. And I just thought that was great how he brought in transcendentalism and the Buddhism and the Judaism and the Christianity. And basically I felt he wasn't as blunt as I'm being, but to me, that was one of the things. Most of the places that are supposed to be paradise aren't, or are reasons for death and destruction.
Well, wasn't there, what did the Dalai Lama say to this one person who kept talking about it? Some dream that didn't happen for him. And the Dalai Lama's response was, it's the wrong dream.
Wrong dream. Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and I thought the Dalai Lama was the most practical person in the book.
Yes.
And just the most, accepting. And Larry, I've heard him speak a couple of times, and he's a very special, unusual man. But I know, Hannah, you've heard him speak too. But I do think, that to me was the real story of the book, was the Dalai Lama just telling people, be here now, pay attention, and try to help other people, give money to a school, buy a book for somebody. It's all such simple, direct stuff.
Yeah, that was on page 132. And then he says, after he says wrong dream, he says, pursuing an unrealistic dream was an insult to reality as well as to dreamer and to dream.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, you just feel like when someone like that is telling you that, pay attention. Because, especially the life that he's had, and, living apart from where he was born for so long, and yet he still has this kind of hope about him and positive feeling, and it's very inspiring. Gosh, wow.
Yeah, and I think on page 217 with similar comments to what we've been saying, that his central conclusion is, so I came back from Sarnath. I decided that I would no longer seek out holy places in this city of temples. I would just let life come to me in all its happy confusion and find the holiness in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that the last chapter about Varanasi, my God, I mean, it was so vivid and terrifying, and yet, you know, he keeps coming back to the people there, you know, carrying the bodies to the Ganges and being joyful, you know, that it was this city of joy within, you know, all of the burning bodies and that everything happened right along the water. And then if you got 8 blocks away from the water, it was a whole different place, you know, this place of quiet and thoughtfulness. And yeah, it's really that chapter really amazed me. The last 2 chapters, the chapter on Japan and the chapter about Varanasi, just thought, geez.
Well, I think that was a reflection of it really built the book. I mean, from the wandering around conflict, no, not really finding a place. And then as he gets to Sri Lanka, in India there and Japan, there's much more detail. He becomes more personally involved. And so there the book sort of naturally reaches its climax, I think, just by the way in which he tells his story. It's much different in those ending chapters in the beginning.
Yeah. And the man who knew his parents and told him stories about his parents and filled in things he would otherwise have never known. It's just
I have to confess, I read that last chapter and I thought it was Afterward. It was titled Afterward. I thought, well, this is an awfully long afterward. And I kept telling Mike, he read it after me, oh, wait till you get to the afterward chapter. It's really great, but it's long. Mike finally gets there and he says, you know, Charlotte, it's Afterworld. But I do, but that also struck me that those chapters that I felt were the strongest, and I think we've already commenting on, do in fact deal more with the afterlife, and the question of the afterlife.
yeah.
I almost wondered if he wasn't preparing himself for death in some of this.
Yeah, maybe.
Do we know how old this author is?
He's a little older than I am, and I'm a little younger than God. So he's I think he's 80.
Oh,
Maybe
okay. Well, I think you're
Is he
right.
80? I didn't know he was that old.
He may not be that old. He may be a little younger than I am,
But I think you're right. I really like the conclusion of that Afterworld chapter where he said all the lighter beauty we could find, we had to find right now. The fact that nothing lasts is the reason why everything matters. The thought that we must die, I might have heard the 200,000 graves saying, is the reason we must live well. So I think you're right that he was trying to prepare himself and accept his inevitable death.
Okay, he's 66, so
yeah, that's right.
don't be pushing him too hard here.
He's younger. That's
James, you're younger than you thought.
Yeah, wow, I feel great all of a sudden.
But I think that passage that you just quoted from, I mean, it also goes back to what Janet said about the delight in the moment, you know, I mean, that's what we have. We have these delights in moments, you know, I mean, I realize as we're talking that, I mean, you know, when I was reading The Green Hour, I was thinking a lot about paradise, you know, from a really personal perspective, like, oh, these paradisical places that I've lost, you know, and you know, what this particular patch of land that I live on in Wisconsin is. And I have an unpublished poem called Paradise, and it's really just about realizing, you know, I'm sitting on the back hill, I'm watching my husband run with our dogs, and I'm like, man, this is it. This is it, you know, these moments when you're seeing that and you're thinking, wow, do I have enough clean underwear for the work week? You know, what am I going to make for dinner? You know, and you're noticing, you know, the incredible beauty around you just in the moment. I mean, that's
No,
it, you know. I mean, nice if there's an afterlife, but I'm not holding my breath, you know. I mean, I think there is some kind of afterlife actually, but I mean, we don't know what it is, so we better make the most of this, you know. I see you shaking your head, Diane.
Like I said, even despite all that Catholic education, yeah, I don't know that I believe in an afterlife. I don't know whether there is one or not. And it doesn't really matter to me, I don't think, if there is one or not.
But we're here now, you know,
We're here
it
now.
is that be
Yeah.
here now thing.
Larry? In
Yes,
1978, when I was a young school teacher, a group of us started a rather hit and miss community theater together. And one of the plays we did was The Taming of the Shrew. And I played Tranio, which is, you know, one of Shakespeare's many brilliant things that he did over and over was write servants who were smarter than their masters. You know, Tranio is by far the most fun part in that play, and I had a ball playing it. And I can remember standing on stage one night, listening to Kate give that speech, her famous end of the play speech with her putting her hand under Petruchio's boot. And just thinking to myself with the lights and the audience and the sound of those beautiful words. And I remember thinking very specifically, there is no place else on earth I would rather be right now than right here. And yeah, so I mean, those moments are just, you just cherish the little moments where that comes to you, and you try to add up as, you know, as make the most of the ones you get, because you don't get them very often, you know.
well, and I think that's the magic of APT, because there's not many theaters when you're outside like that with the trees and the moonlight and everything else. It adds a whole nother dimension that you don't get at most theaters.
True. Having done 22 plays of that goddamn outdoor theater, I never invented outdoor theater, but that's okay. Yeah.
Well,
APT is not your paradise?
Oh, I know it is in a funny way, I suppose. Well, it's APT is my paradise because David Frank was kind enough to hire me when he had no business hiring me, and that led to the bookstore 15 years later. So I guess that's, yeah, that's good.
all
It
right.
was kismet.
Yeah. Nancy?
Do you know what else is paradise? When your book is selected to win the honorable mention for the Edna Ferber Award. So congratulations, Maggie Ginsberg.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, I can't even figure out. Thank you. Thank you. Those Wisconsin Writers Association or Wisconsin Writers Awards, Allison Townsend is also a winner in those. Perhaps you've heard of her.
We recognized her last month.
Well, yeah, for another award.
So Maggie, you know, you said you'd had trouble getting to the book club because of other life events. Hopefully next month you'll join us, because next month we're going to read Still True by Maggie Ginsberg. And Maggie is going to join us, and that is on May 17th.
So no pressure.
Yeah.
And
And
Nancy,
then-
my copy arrived today.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, good. It did get there. Good.
It got, yeah, really fast today.
And
Oh my gosh.
Diane and Mary Pat had been talking about maybe making suggestions of reading a banned book. And so why don't, but for next month, think about a banned book that we could honor by reading, you know, sometime. It's one of the summer books. And just either send an email to Nancy, or we can talk about it next time and vote on it, or, you know, figure it out. But I think that's a really good idea.
Yep, if you go to like the American Library Association, if you just search banned books, you'll get whole list that just keeps getting longer by the day, it seems like. So see if we can find some good ideas there.
I just helped elect a friend of mine to the Waukesha School Board, which used to be great and now has like 8 out of the 9 are book banners. I can send you the list of the 100 books that they want reviewed in the school libraries. Basically anything that has to do with sex, drugs, violence, homosexuality, trans, all the things that make great literature. I can send you that list.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please do.
And Emily will have some good ideas for us. Emily is the Spring Green librarian.
Okay.
All right, folks, thank you so much. We will
Thank
see you
you.
on May 17th for this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
A lot of interesting
Thanks,
thoughts. Thanks.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, good discussion.